Boxing truth here. Alright, let me get my 2 cents in on this Golovkin-Jacobs fight this past weekend. I had to watch the fight a couple of more times just to make sure I saw what I saw. It was not the easiest of fights to score, in my opinion. It was, from my honest assessment of the fight, it was a competitive fight. It was Golovkin's toughest fight to date in terms of competition. Golovkin couldn't score his 24th consecutive stoppage. The streak is over. But Golovkin retained his titles for an 18th straight middleweight title defense with a unanimous decision over Danny Jacobs this past Saturday at the Garden. Now, I scored the fight myself 8-4 for Gennady Golovkin. Now, I can see the uproar from people because when it comes to Triple G, people, especially Golovkin's haters, are crying robbery because they expect so much from Gennady Golovkin. The expectations are sky high for Golovkin. Golovkin is so dominant in his outings, especially as of late. 23 straight stoppages, and when he doesn't knock somebody out, all of a sudden he's a fraud, he's hype, or he ain't shit, he got schooled, whatever. But you gotta score fights based on what's going on in the fight, not based off a fighter's reputation. Just because a fighter who is a knockout destroyer doesn't get a knockout doesn't necessarily mean he's losing a fight or he got schooled. Now, the fight was not the most entertaining. I was underwhelmed by Golovkin's performance, and I was not impressed with Jacobs' mobility and him trying to limit the damage Golovkin was inflicting on him. Danny Jacobs at times was, for the most portion of the fight, was just trying to survive, not trying to get knocked out, and that doesn't impress me. Moral victories don't score 7 rounds on my scorecards. You trying to limit the damage your opponent is inflicting on you as much as possible is not a scoring criteria. It doesn't score 7 rounds for you on my scorecard. You have to land significant punches. You have to land clean punches. You have to land hard punches. You have to show effective aggression. You have to be a ring general. You have to demonstrate your dominance on your opponent. And Jacobs, for the most part, didn't do that. He frustrated Golovkin with his movement at times, but he wasn't very effective with his offense. He was very limited offensively, and Golovkin, he showed good defense Saturday night, didn't get hit too much. He was underwhelming, though. He just wasn't his usual aggressive self, especially since he was in position a lot of the times to really put it on Danny Jacobs, and it didn't seem like he let his hands go as much as usual. Still threw over 600 punches, still established a dominant jab throughout the fight. And that was the difference in the fight. Golovkin's jab was the dominant tool and the most consistent weapon throughout the fight. Danny Jacobs had no answer for Golovkin's jab. He couldn't slip it, couldn't dodge it, kept getting tagged with it all night. And it was the most significant blow of the fight. However, some of the rounds were hard to score because some of the rounds were very quiet. And the rounds that I gave to him, they were close, competitive. They were not dominant rounds like some of the rounds Golovkin won. But I scored 4 of the first 5 rounds for Gennady Golovkin. I gave the first and third round for Golovkin. Those were quiet rounds, but Danny Jacobs did practically nothing besides move around the ring and stay away from Golovkin's power. But that's not a scoring criteria. You gotta land some punches. Didn't land many punches in those rounds. Golovkin didn't do much. He didn't have a great offensive output, or he didn't land a lot of damaging blows in those rounds, but he was very effective with his jab, and that's why I gave him those rounds. He landed a few more cleaner punches in the round. He just did more. He was the ring general, the aggressor, and landed more punches. While Jacobs was just moving around and just trying to limit the damage as much as possible. But then the knockdown came, and then Golovkin had a big 5th round. My prediction almost came through. I thought it was going to be easy work. And it seemed like it was going to go in that direction as Jacobs got knocked down in the 4th round. He wasn't particularly hurt, just got dropped. And then he got tagged up pretty good in the 5th round. Looked like Golovkin was going to put an end to it in the 5th. But then all of a sudden, Jacobs came back in the 6th. I felt it was possibly maybe his best round, but it was still a close competitive round. The 2nd round I also gave to Jacobs. So after 6 rounds, I had it 4 rounds to 2 for Gennady Golovkin. Now, the 7th round was very tricky. Very hard round to score. But I gave it to Golovkin. I just felt he was more consistent with his jab. I felt he landed more cleaner, more effective punches. But it was a very competitive round. 8th and 9th round was all Gennady Golovkin. There's no debate. All 3 judges agreed that Golovkin won the 8th and 9th round. And Jacobs, he had a little minor comeback in the 10th and the 11th. I thought he won those rounds as well. And I gave the 12th round to Gennady Golovkin. So my final tally was 8 rounds to 4. But I could definitely see a 115, 112, 7 rounds to 5 score if you gave the 7th round to Jacobs. It was a swing round in my opinion. 2 of the 3 judges gave it to Jacobs. 1 judge gave it to Golovkin. The 12th round, 2 of the 3 judges gave it to Jacobs. 1 gave it to Golovkin. So for the people screaming robbery, the judges, 2 of the 3 judges gave Jacobs the last 3 rounds and still didn't have him winning. Now Jacobs, he fought a game performance. He was able to last the distance with Gennady Golovkin. That is not an easy thing to do. He puts so much pressure. He has a great jab and power that can really break you down over a long course of a fight, duration of 12 rounds. And Jacobs did a good job by limiting the damage that Golovkin was inflicting on him. But as a result, he still came away from the fight not unscathed. He got marked up pretty good. He got dropped. He got hurt pretty bad in the 9th round. It's just Golovkin. It was an underwhelming performance. He did make some mistakes. He wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't go to the body enough. He didn't throw the uppercut when he was on the inside enough. So he made a lot of mistakes that made this fight more competitive than it should have been. Now, I don't know if Golovkin was taking it easy on Jacobs. I'm not in his body. I don't know. But I was very surprised that Golovkin didn't drop this chump in Danny Jacobs. He dropped him, but he didn't stop him. And I just felt that Golovkin wasn't his usual self in terms of aggressiveness, in terms of punch output, and in terms he didn't go to the body much in the fight. And it was one of the most underwhelming Golovkin fights I've ever seen. I was kind of bored. It was around the 8th round, 9th round. I was like, shit, this actually is going to go 12 rounds. And no doubt, I was nervous for Triple G because I don't trust judges. I felt Golovkin won, but you just never know when it goes 12 rounds and you leave it in the hands of the judges. So Golovkin, luckily for him, the judges finally called it. They scored an accurate fight. I have no problem with none of the 3 judges' scorecards. I felt 115, 112 was more accurate. Was probably the most accurate scorecard that you could give to Golovkin. I didn't see Golovkin winning 10 rounds. I think the most you could argue for Triple G is 8. And the most you can argue for Danny Jacobs is 5 rounds. And I'm being as fair as possible to Jacobs. He did as well as he could, but he did not defeat Triple G. You need to do more than just avoid someone's power. You need to do more than just limit the damage. You gotta do some damage. You gotta land some significant shots. And if you look at the fight, Jacobs just didn't do much offensively. I mean, Golovkin was fresh after the fight. He had nothing on him. Looked like he wasn't even in the fight. And Jacobs looked like he went through a windmill. Even though it was one of the most underwhelming offensive performances of Golovkin, he still put in some work. Still landed a lot of significant blows. Still hurt Jacobs. Still put him down. Still was popping with that jab throughout the whole fight. And that was the difference. Golovkin's jab was the most effective, the most dominant tool of the fight. And Jacobs, he proved people wrong. He went the distance. A lot of people thought he was going to get iced. Even people that fucking are screaming robbery for him, none of these motherfuckers even believed in him. None of them picked him. None of them thought that he was even gonna be able to go past 5-6 rounds with Golovkin. Very few gave Jacobs a chance even to compete with Golovkin. Very few. But now people want to scream robbery, but I'm not gonna call it a robbery because it's not a robbery. Triple G won the fight. It was competitive though. And because of the dominance of Triple G, because of him not knocking out Jacobs, because of him actually have to go 12 rounds, people are going to see this as a L for Golovkin. But it was a flat performance, not the most entertaining fight. But Golovkin is the rightful winner, remains undefeated. And of course, Jacobs' team are going to want a rematch, but Tom Loeffler, Golovkin's team, ain't really that interested right now. Just like when Apollo Creed told Rocky Balboa after their first war, there ain't gonna be no rematch. And it's not because Golovkin doesn't want to give Jacobs a rematch. He feels he deserves a rematch. But right now, there's other business to attend to. There's the mission of accomplishing all the goals in the middleweight division. The priority is still a Canelo fight in the future as well, over a Danny Jacobs rematch, but maybe they can do it down the line. And I feel Golovkin can do much better, and Jacobs, he cannot do any better than that. Game performance, but still not enough to defeat Triple G, the world middleweight king. Golovkin moves on, gets the right call. Finally, the judges finally scored an accurate fight. They gave rounds to both Golovkin and Jacobs, most of the rounds that they deserve, for the most part. Some judges gave Jacobs, 2 judges gave Jacobs the 12th. A couple of judges gave Jacobs the 7th. But overall, it was not a bad judging performance by the 3 judges. They got the right guy at least. Golovkin moves on and continue his reign in the middleweight division. But y'all let me know what y'all think. How'd you score it? I saw a competitive but clear win for Triple G. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.